Good afternoon, everyone. If you haven't subscribed, do so. It's free. You want to do something to help the channel that doesn't take long at all and is free, you can do that. But an important topic today, and it's going to encompass a lot of different scenarios, but it is the question of what is the narcissist's best friend? In other words, in order to get their supply, what is their greatest ally? It's not their flying monkeys, it's not their enablers, it's not their perceived intelligence, or in some cases their looks. No, it's double standards. For a narcissist to gain and maintain power in most situations and keep other people down and keep their secrets swept under the rug and keep that mask on and that false image, their precious status quo. In order to maintain that, they need double standards in their favor, and they need negative double standards against people they deem as threats. This environment allows them to continue their actions, it allows them to acquire more victims, and it also keeps down and discredits those they deem as a threat. INFJs especially. They see us coming a mile away. Unfortunately, as rare as INFJs are, you know one when you see one. You know one when you see one. And narcissists know that's a problem. Especially if a male narcissist spots a male INFJ. As rare as we are, they're probably what are the odds? Because there ain't many of us. But we'll get into a couple different scenarios in which double standards are the key to the narcissist's power and how they use that and how, it is used against everyone else. This could be in a family situation, in a relationship, in a work situation. I'll give various examples because I've seen them all. It can be with a golden child sibling too. So, in a family situation, let's take the golden child, all right? So the golden child of the narcissistic parent, the rules aren't going to apply to them. The black sheep will be subjected to very strict rules and, basically not given any slack. The narcissist will look for a reason to come at the black sheep, to try to control them, to try to keep the black sheep from feeling any form of empowerment. They fear that black sheep. They want that black sheep to have no confidence, to feel like they have to be dependent on the narcissist, that they have to go along with the program or, something catastrophic will happen. That was my upbringing where, and really in case, because it wasn't just my borderline mother, my enabler father was on that too. Straight up lying on how important grades were. And, there's always double standards. Even when you achieve or out-achieve them, they'll discredit it or move the goalpost. Now, I'll give an example even with an enabler like my father. Now, I'm not saying, college GPAs are all that important unless you're planning on going to grad school. I'm not saying getting good grades in college is, really anything too special. But, getting honors in college is more of an accomplishment than doing it in high school. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I got honors in college, give me $100,000 a year. No, but it's it would be the same as I was, the star player of my Division II college hockey team. You're not going pro or nothing, still pretty cool. Certainly more of an accomplishment than being the captain of your high school team because, I graduated Penn State, same as my father. I graduated cum laude. He graduated with a 2.7. But then he, was well, my high school grades were better. It's okay. You ever seen two pro athletes where it's I beat all your records. Well, my high school records are still unbeaten. It's nobody cares. So things like that. And especially going back to the golden child can do no wrong. There'll always be, second chances. With the black sheep is basically the child that, can do everything right, do what they're told, but somehow whatever they do, even if it's exactly what they're told to do, is somehow never good enough. Whereas the golden child can, be the young, fuck up who, no matter how many times he crashes the Camaro, daddy buys him a new one. In other words, they're always getting bailed out. They're never in trouble. They never face consequences for their actions. They don't have to have jobs or anything. The black sheep can't get a dime out of their parents. Like the black sheep couldn't even be like, and this is a real situation where it's like, it could say it's the beginning of the summer. It's like, me and my friends were planning to go away for the weekend. Can I borrow $400? Like I start my job on Monday. I'll pay you back when I get my first check. Like I have a 60-hour a week job already locked in. It's just, can't start till Monday is when they said I could start. I got this last weekend off. I'm going to be working 6, likely 7 days a week all summer. No. Golden child doesn't even have a job. Can I get some monies? And that's how my brother talked. I don't mean that to be disrespectful to any culture or race. That is just an accurate representation of how my brother talks, despite the fact that he is even whiter than I am. We are full siblings of Irish and Italian descent. Culturally, we were raised Italian American. I think it's pretty obvious, what side I look like. He's the opposite. He's blonde and blue-eyed, so. But it's situations like that. Now, growing up as a kid, you probably don't even, something's not right, but you can't really, maybe nowadays with YouTube and channels like this and the far more successful ones, there's information out there. But like in my era, like growing up in the 90s, like you knew it wasn't right, but the people around you, because boomers never call out other boomers, or very rarely, especially back then, you knew something wasn't right, but no one would say anything, at least maybe like a little whisper when it was you were alone, just to give you that crumbs of validation. But other than that, nothing. Let's move on to adulthood, okay? Let's go into the workplace. Let's talk about double standards there and how the narcissist maintains control. Well, the narcissist they'll be a good bullshitter. They'll, finesse somebody in authority. It's always somebody in authority. They're always brown-nosing, okay? They're always brown-nosing to try to get that person on their side, to get that person to believe they are the character they're playing. And they only have to convince that one person. If they can convince that one person, they'll use groupthink to try to, get everybody else on board. And that is a situation I've dealt with more than once, semi-recently I dealt with it, where you could be, again, similar, like in the black sheep situation, you could be doing everything they ask. You could be being told, you're doing great, blah, 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 blah. But you're not advancing at all. And you could say, be patient, But if you're the black sheep in a work environment, and again, you're the person that the narcissist, the one benefiting from the double standard, sees as a threat, you're not just going to be ignored. That's one thing. You're going to be targeted. You're going to get less than everybody else. They're going to purposely hold you back. Because the last thing the narcissist can have is you competing with them. So their allies, the ones they brown nose to, they will hold you back. Now this will go on. You can follow the system as I've tried, go into HR and all that, and all those people can even agree with you and tell you everything you said is valid. The narcissist ally, as soon as the higher ups that aren't there every day aren't there, it goes right back to the way it was. It might get better for like a week, but now there's an even bigger target on your back. And as far as like the narcissist, the chosen one, well, the exact opposite is true. No matter how many infractions, they do, it's swept under the rug. In other words, like offenses that anyone else would not only not be considered for a promotion for doing, but would straight up be fired for, and in most of these cases, justifiably so. We're talking very egregious things. We're not talking mistakes or, somebody misunderstanding something said in jest. We're talking major deliberate infractions. Sweep it under the rug, sweep it under the rug. And anybody else trying to advance, hold them back, give them nothing, break them, do whatever you can to make them go out the door, to feel like that it's not worth it anymore. We must prop up the narcissist. We must prop up the chosen one. And this could be a lot of things. It could be the narcissist truly fools somebody. A lot of times it's based on tribalism. That can be many different things. It can be, race, religion. It could be a fraternity. It could be a sports club. It could be a high school clique. It could be the good old boys club, which is the one I've been battling for too many years and have the scars to prove it. But in that situation, you can feel powerless. And it's for many reasons. Now, again, I'm specifically speaking to people with integrity because, I kind of draw on the other INFJs of this channel. It can be especially bad for you because you're the one they're holding back the most, but it affects other people too. And in this way, and this is why the narcissist benefits so much from double standards at work. Because it gets to a point where everybody can see it and somebody has to speak up. And that's usually when, the INFJ is thrust into leadership. But when it comes time to actually unite and be like, we all see this, like the jig is up, ain't no one gonna back you. So it just continues and goes on and on and on. And a lot of times the people that are enabling the narcissist behavior, they have, they're well established and they have people protecting them too. So instead of holding that person accountable, they continue to sweep it under the rug and allow the narcissist to continue their actions, no matter who it affects, in what way, and no matter, the numerous offenses of different types and how many different people it affects, it just goes on. And what can get even worse is usually that narcissist then themselves gets in a position of power, and then a narcissist with power redefines the old term power trip, because they abuse that authority. Narcissists, a lot of times, especially in the workforce, and I've seen this multiple times, try to act with authority they don't have. So part of their reason for sucking up to like people in positions of power is so that, they can be enabled to act as if they're management when they're really not. I've seen this in 2 different retail jobs. Yeah. And they're often, tattletales and rats. Anything, if you're someone they perceive as a threat, anything they can potentially use against you, they're going to do it. And doesn't, even if there's just a sliver of truth within it, they're going to make it way worse than it really is. Yeah, I had it when I was working in loss prevention. There was a big scandal about me because everybody talked about the way me and a female coworker of mine about the same age, the way we looked at each other from across the room. Come to think of it, the same thing happened when I was at a different retail place in sales. Yeah, in the first situation, it made no sense why the narcissist was coming after me, because said narcissist. Well, no, actually, he was a male borderline. He wasn't into girls. It was a secret, but it eventually came out. And the second time it was because, he said female in question, the chosen one, had claimed as his property. But double standards is how they thrive. And even like narcissistically as a generation, like the baby boomers are the masters of thriving in double standards. Like, they a lot of times they won't admit or just straight up lie about how much worse the middle and working class have it since the 80s, since voodoo economics, since neoliberalism, and a little later NAFTA and all that. Basically, since they came to power, since they got the reins of power, it started with Ray, Slick Willie, we the corporate Democrats now, voted for me. I'm going to take your jobs. And then years later, I'm going to tell you to vote for my wife. But, or W, it doesn't matter, both parties. So take college, for example. a baby boomer be like, well, I paid for my tuition working a summer job. And I'll use myself as an example. Again, me and my father, him boomer, late 70s, me late 2000s, same school, in-state student, state school. Good example. Adjusted for inflation, he paid a third of what I did. In other words, taking his $78, making them $2,009, it was a third. Now, I work 60 to 80 hours a week, depending on if we got rained out or not, doing golf course maintenance when I was in college. If my bill was a third of what it was, i.e. equal to his in the late 70s, in inflation-adjusted dollars, I would have had no problem paying for it with my summer job. But I didn't have that opportunity. It's not that myself and others didn't put the work in. It's like the opportunity wasn't there. Or another classic one that I get from the boomer double standards is, well, we were able to work hard in steel mills and factories. You just wouldn't do that. It's like, no, those jobs were outsourced when we were in elementary school. Well, because you wouldn't work them. It's like, in my case, the biggest one was Luke and Steel. It's like, yeah, that closed in 1997. I was 10 and therefore never had that opportunity. Yeah, but they don't have answers for that. But the double standards that prop them up, that gave them opportunity, whether that opportunity was completely undeserved or just granted far more easily, crickets. They never have an answer for it. And the narcissist thrives in that. Because on equal playing field, the narcissist can't compete. The game has to be rigged in their favor. And they will do whatever it takes to rig that game, whether it is propping themselves, it's propping themselves up and it's keeping certain other people down, which then frightens other people from speaking up or even backing up people that are willing to speak out. And that's how, in any situation, be it work, relationship, parent, that's how the cycle of abuse continues, because they feel they have the high ground. You're beaten down like no matter what you do, nothing's going to change even when you do speak out, because everybody's too afraid to back you up. And on it goes. So until you break the cycle and break the chains, the narcissist maintains control. You take away their double standards, they can't stand on their own. Break that platform. So I hope that was helpful and answered the question as to why double standards are the narcissist's best friend, and allow them to act the way they act and get them in the positions that they have. Also nepotism too, but that's a topic for another. I think I have done a video a long time ago about that. Hope that was helpful. Remember, have integrity, have free will, call out shit that's wrong. You have the free will to do so. Hail Lilith.